Full house. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming along to today's meeting, for those who are here in person and for those who are also streaming in. As we meet here on the land of the Palawa people, it is my first time to open the meeting at 1 o'clock. Turning to agenda item number 1, attendance and apologies. We have 2 apologies today from Councillor Gibson and Councillor Mackenzie. In terms of the mayoral acknowledgements, I would like to take this opportunity to thank and recognise the incredible amount of work that Councillor Danny Gibson has done in and for the community, having worked incredibly hard for the betterment, and we are all privileged to that betterment of our community. So I would like to use the mayoral acknowledgements for that. Declarations of interest. There will be a few of those here today as we are dealing with grants. So, under the Local Government Act of 1993, Section 48, a councillor must declare any interests that councillors have as a matter before any discussion on the matter before it commences. Do we have some declarations of interest? We have Councillor Dawkins. Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Item 15.1 for consideration of the signature event sponsorship for the Tamar Valley Cycle Challenge, and also 15.3 for the consideration, the grant application under the major events funding. Thank you.
Councillor Palmer?
15.1 signature events for against sport. Thank you.
Any other declarations of interest? All right, okay. Moving to agenda item 4, confirmation of minutes. May I have someone to move? Moved by Councillor Harris. Seconder, Councillor Dawkins. Excellent. All those in favour? Any speaking to the motion? No. All those in favour? All councillors present. Motion is carried. Okay, moving to agenda item number 5, councillor workshops. 5.1, noting the disposal of 56 Frederick Street, Launceston, Visit North Tasmania, Invermay ABCDE learning site, commercial lease. We did the customer service charter, Northern Suburbs Community Recreational Hub, the former Birchall's building, and event sponsorship. Some of those we'll speak more of today. Can I get someone to move that? That's accurate. Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Seconder, Councillor Walker. Councillor Dawkins, would you like to speak?
Just briefly to note that after successful ABCD learning sites, that we will engage in a strategic review of that program to ensure that we are heading in the right direction and that we make any amendments as necessary to that vital program for our community.
Thank you. Councillor Walker?
Yes, I would like to speak to that. It is, certainly of importance to the people of Launceston that 56 Frederick Street, the formerly known as Frederick Street Kindergarten, is a building that is currently under review, and to note that this is a building that a council has owned for approximately 130 years after the building was constructed using public subscription. So obviously a building of some importance, not just to people who've gone there when it was a kindergarten, but for generations before us for different reasons, and that council will have a very close look at that building and what its future use could be. And I encourage anyone who has an interest and can see a potential there to reach out to council. And likewise with the ABCDE learning site, I'm pleased to know that that will be reviewed, and what a spectacular way that council is reaching out to suburbs in Launceston and really gauging how people are wanting to see their suburbs improve and change. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you. Just I found of great interest was the Northern Suburbs Community Recreation Hub update, something that I'm sure former Mayor Albert Van Zetten will be very pleased to hear, as this was on his agenda for a long time. What we were shown certainly will be something that has been long awaited, but it also will be well worth waiting for. It is a state government project. There is a little bit of council involvement, but fundamentally the state government have carriage of it. But it will do a lot to alleviate some of the demand for indoor sporting stadiums in this city for both basketball, futsal, and thankfully netball as well. Thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I think for me, I was interested to see some development happening with the Birchall's building in the mall. We've been waiting a long time to see something happening in that space. So I look forward to seeing that progress further.
Nobody else taking it to the vote? Put it around the table. All those in favour? That's everyone. Carried? Okay, moving to item agenda number 6, which is councillors' leave of absence applications. This one will be dealt with in closed council. Okay, moving into item agenda number 7, community reports. We don't have any community reports today as part of the agenda. Public question time, number 8. We do have the public questions that are on notice, that you will note have been provided in the agenda. So we'll then move forward to public questions without notice. And I'll just state here that with public questions without notice, you'll be able to ask up to 3 questions. You will have a time limit of 2 minutes. And the open questions guidelines were out and are stated. If you do, need to read those ones before you speak. Thank you. Do we have some speakers here today?
Yeah, thank you, Acting Mayor. Jim Dickinson, 261 West Hamer Road. I'm a froggy voice today, which is unfortunate. Last meeting, I had 3 questions. Two were answered, one wasn't. The first one was to do with the Albert Hall demolition, and it was moved that it got moved down to the agenda item to be discussed rather than discussed at question time. When it got to the agenda item, the fact of the demolition wasn't discussed at all. So I'm asking that question again now because it wasn't dealt with last week, last month, last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Dickens. Thank you for your question.
Okay, yeah, so I think council should totally reconsider the demolition of the eastern wing now that there's a massive shortfall in the project as it now stands. The first 2 aims of the renewal project, as stated in the report, which you got last week, were the first 2 was to provide equal access and entry to the building, and the second was to make the foyer larger and it could also double as an exhibition space. So just by increasing the existing foyer, those 2 aims could easily be met. The existing foyer overlooks the city park. It's got a double height ceiling. It's got a grand staircase, and all those are quite positive requirements. So with no demolition, just by simply enlarging the existing foyer, the project could be well underway. And the report mentioned several times value for money. So obviously just by extending what's there, that would obviously be value for money. So the question basically is, why does the eastern wing need to be totally demolished?
Thank you, Ken. Thank you for your question. There was quite a lot of community consultation that was put to the users and the providers of the space, and the foyer and the ability to use that space was something that did rate quite highly in the responses from the people who were using that space. So that was a part of one of the community consultation stages. And the Albert Hall in general is something that is still being worked through by council at the moment, and it hasn't reached its full council approval. We're still working through that process too.
Yeah. When the tender process wasn't successful, well, nearly a year ago now, Council appointed Sharp Australia to provide design and constructability advice for the project. That's obviously proved very difficult. It's taken some 7 months, and in the report it mentions that SHAPE has at last completed that work and gave their price to council, but it was not accepted according to the last report. So a fortnight ago, SHAPE Australia, it was made the point that they've completed their work. They provided council with a budget for that work, but it was not accepted. And they sent SHAPE back to the drawing board to provide an updated price, and they gave them a month, which is a fortnight ago, to provide that revised price. So SHAPE can't just reduce their price to make council happy, because their profits would be lowered, and that's they're not going to lower their price and lower their profits. The other option was, if they're going to reprice it, obviously the design needs to change again. You can't keep repricing the same thing and trying to get a different answer. So what is the result that the council is expecting, as I say, at the end of May from SHAPE Australia? What are you expecting to get?
General Manager, I might direct that question to you, speaking on what we're expecting to get rebudgeting and repricing.
So I must say, SHAPE are repricing it and reviewing their costs and how they price it. I must say the expectation that SHAPE have given us is that there will be a reduced cost.
Yes, as I said, the cost just can't be reduced because they will lose profits, and they're not going to do that.
Did you have one more question?
Yeah, I do, yeah. You may recall when the project started 8 or 9 months ago, I wrote to the council and saying that the proposed roof is extremely complicated design. It would be very expensive to build, and I even said maybe it will be unbuildable. So what changes to the roof design have been made following SHAPE being engaged to look into the design and the constructability of various aspects of the development?
Okay, I might send that one to you as well, General Manager Shane, because the design is something you might be a little more
Yeah,
around.
look, I must say that SHAPE haven't identified any constraints in the design so far.
I accept your answer, but that's taken 7 months to make that statement. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
It's all very disappointing.
All right, now did we have Tony Thompson speaking today?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr Mayor and councillors. My name's Tony Thompson of 90 Norwood Avenue. Speaking about the plane trees, I delivered a petition along with the photos of November last year. When are the plane trees going to be reduced by 2/3 to alleviate the root damage? Secondly, when is the damage done by the current roots going to be fixed, i.e. the footpath down near the Norwood IGA and the driveway opposite the Norwood News Agency? And thirdly, are the councillors prepared to go for a walk along Norwood Avenue and have a look rather than have a look at what you actually might have seen on paper? And just one other thing, there was an article in the Examiner last year saying that the plane trees are going to stay. We never wanted them taken out, but we want them reduced by 2/3. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your questions. Might direct that one once again to you, General Manager.
So council did receive the petition in November last year, and then on the 15th of December, council made the decision that the plane trees in Norwood Avenue were to be continued to be pruned and managed in accordance with existing schedules, that we would undertake a community engagement process to understand how we would manage them long term, and the development of a long-term management plan for street trees in Norwood Avenue would be in line with our current urban greening plan. Consultation is just completed on our urban greening plan, and so we're about to commence consultation with the street on how, on their view on what the management of trees look like into the future. We have scheduled the removal of the stump and the tree that's been secondary poisoned within the next month to two. So in terms of damaged infrastructure, I must say it has been assessed and reported in the report on the 15th of December that damage is not due to the plane trees, and I've got the reports here to provide them if you like.
With all due respect, that's why I asked the council to come along and have a look. Councillor Gibson, in his previous role, came along, and he was going to actually invite all the councillors to go on a bus and come for a look rather than have a look at what's on paper. So,
yep, thanks, Tony. We will do that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, we have John Gardner.
Afternoon, Mr Mayor, councillors. John Gardner, 32 Maitland Street. Regarding DA 733, 28 Maitland Street, the multi-unit development there, how many councillors have had the opportunity to read the material that I sent to them? 2 or 3, 4? Thank you. Is council fully aware of the shortcomings, errors and limitations in the planning report and developers' plans?
Look, I'm not sure that this line of questioning is quite what the questions without notice is to direct them to the table.
Sure.
But if you're able to direct your questions in a way that we can take on notice, or we can try and find a response from a general manager or so forth. But yes, it's a little open to be talking to the table.
Well, maybe the development of 28 Maitland Street doesn't comply with the planning rules by a considerable margin and relies only on a subjective assessment of the performance criteria in regard to 8.4.2 and 8.4.3. That's in the planning report that was included. It also relies on modifications to the approved plans for 20 Church Street. Has council considered the risks that may arise if they proceed with this development?
Yeah. So this is something that we will be speaking of today. Mm-hmm. So in the protocols of this meeting going forward, we don't make comment on an active agenda item,
sure.
But please feel free to stick around for when we do get to the planning authority part of the meeting, and the report, councillor concerns, views, discretionaries, they'll all come into place and into converse there.
Thank you.
Brent?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Good afternoon. Brent Crawford, 271 Charles Street, Launceston, Vice Chairman of the Tasmanian Turf Club. This is just a statement regarding funding for the upcoming Launceston Cup Carnival. The Launceston Cup is Tasmania's premier horse race and social event. The Launceston Cup and Carnival brings tourism into Launceston from all over the country, most staying in Launceston for a minimum of 4 nights, boosting the Launceston economy. The Launceston Cup Day is the only event where the club makes a profit. This profit is then put back into the club to enable us to run another 25 race meetings, conducted in a year that runs at a loss. Patron numbers were down this year compared to pre-COVID levels, and the club needs all funding that we can get to assist in getting those numbers back to pre-COVID levels. Last year's report on the size and scope of the Tasmanian racing industry, produced by IER and commissioned by Tas Racing, clearly shows the positive impact racing has on Tasmania for the economic, employment and cultural standing point. Key findings that you'll be familiar with and that Tas Racing uses often to speak about the importance of the industry to state include: the industry generates close to $185 million in valued added contribution to the Tasmanian economy. 38% directly benefits regional communities here in Tasmania. The industry supports 1,500 full-time equivalent jobs. More than 5,800 individuals are involved in racing as they're an employee, participant or volunteer, 63% of those in regional communities. The industry generates almost 165 million in direct expenditure into Tasmania. Racing is a strong industry with close regional ties throughout the state. Just in closing, from a criteria point of view, we believe we hit all aspects, i.e. participation, creative and innovation, community spirit, economics, tourism profile, progressive and asset usage. In closing, the Launceston City Council has always supported the TTC and our events, and we do rely on this funding to viable assets for the community. Thank you for your time as always, Mayor.
Brent, if I just have that formed in the way of a question, I'm taking that the question is, was this all considered in the recommendation from the committee when coming to council to be spoken of today?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, great. Well, again, this is a very similar response to prior that will be spoken of today.
Right.
It is an active item agenda, and we will work our way through that when we get to the sponsorships and grants, where all of those factors will come into converse, and we'll have a conversation around it around the table.
Certainly, hence why we've come here this afternoon to present those.
Right.
So for the questioning later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Do we have Linda White?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. I listened with great interest.
Sorry to interrupt the notice.
Oh, sorry, Lindell White. Lindell White, 255 Penquite Road, Norwood. I'm getting ahead of myself. I listened with great interest to the discussion surrounding Councillor Dawkins' motion to support vets in our community, which received substantial support from numerous councillors and generated positive discussion regarding the need to raise awareness of wildlife in the city and educate people about the presence of wildlife on our roads. However, in December 2022, I contacted every single person sitting at this table about the carnage occurring on Penquite Road. 5 animals hit in 8 days on a 100-metre stretch. But the only responses I received were from Councillors Dawkins and Mackenzie. I've been trying for 18 months to obtain some action to raise awareness along this stretch of road, only to be told that the signage doesn't work and that because they were only paddy melons, they weren't worth the effort. I'm paraphrasing there, but the sentiment was clear. It is only a matter of time before the casualties are human rather than paddy melons. Wildlife belongs to us all, and the welfare of our native animals is the responsibility of every Tasmanian. As an addendum to the discussions surrounding vets, I should point out that the state's approximately 200 wildlife rehabilitators care for thousands of animals, and last year Bonnarong took in 15,000 rescue calls. A lot of those go to carers. 15,000 into 200 really doesn't go. They bear all of the financial costs of veterinary treatment, food, medication and so on without any support whatsoever. So my questions are, do councillors agree that the best solution to the challenges raised would be to prevent wildlife actually requiring veterinary treatment in the first instance? So I'm not, given the previous question, I'm not expecting an answer to that, but I'd like it on record. Question 2, is the council willing to revisit the issue of mitigation and harm minimisation strategies, which could include smart signage rather than regular signage, temporarily adjusted speed limit reductions on Penquite Road before the carnage begins again, potentially resulting in the loss of a human rather than that of a paddy melon? And 3, given the sentiments expressed at the previous meeting, is the council prepared to draw on its resources, partly generated by our local wildlife and natural environment, many of the councillors sitting at the table actually used as their part of their election platform, and work with wildlife groups, rehabilitators, vets and state government to lead the way in implementing an education and awareness program about living with wildlife in the Greater Launceston region, which would benefit both animals and humans, and declare Launceston a wildlife-friendly city. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you for your questions there as well, and your passion and your care for this part of our community is quite infectious, and I think to stem on from the conversations that you've been able to have and the positive way in which this council has embraced those conversations, I think should be quite encouraging for you. In terms of responses to your questions, I think that's something that we can take on notice and we can do a little more delving into and finding some actual responses that might facilitate the needs of your questions and requirements.
Thank you. That's all I can ask. And please, I'd be happy to contribute in any way that I can, given my background and my contacts, if you require any further information.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've got some more in the room. Rosemary Armitage, MLC.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. My first question, while I appreciate the transit centre lease was between a private owner, a previous council having sold off all of Cornwall Square car park, and private bus companies, will the council actively become involved in trying to find an alternative area for passengers to embark and disembark buses rather than on busy Charles Street with little to no amenity, which has been described by some as an accident waiting to happen? Or can you advise what the council are doing or are prepared to do to ease the situation?
Thanks for your question, Rosemary. We are definitely actively working in this space at the moment, particularly with state growth. I even had a phone call 2 days ago from Michael Ferguson speaking of this, and the social media that's been around it at the moment. I was really impressed to see how we were able to respond around the clarity of how this did come, as you had stated. But yes, we are actively working in trying to find a better place for it. At the moment, we haven't found anywhere for that to go, but the conversations are continuing with state growth, the operators of those bus services as well, and we fully understand that this isn't an ideal situation, but I am proud of how we could assist in ensuring that those services aren't lost to our community, noting that the toilets being in CH Smith and up in Civic Square aren't ideal. And I do appreciate the work that's being done in space. And
So it is temporary? It is a temporary situation then? You can confirm it is temporary?
I'm not privy to the actual conversations of saying, but at the moment that is definitely not its final destination. As to where that final destination is, I'm not sure. But those conversations are continuing.
Thank you. My second question, and I do note with the CEO that part of the financial question of this one I will leave as on notice to give more time for the answer. But my second part of this question is, given that I was advised on 20 April 2023 that the draft development proposal for the site, the mall, obviously the two buildings in the mall, and I noticed on one of the agenda items that it was discussed at workshop, was to be considered. Can you please advise the outcome, whether council intend to remain the owners of those two properties in the mall, or seek tenants, or will council seek to sell the properties, and will council development be part of the recently purchased car park behind said buildings?
Thank you for your question again. And I want to say too, I appreciate, whilst these are questions without notice, the forefront that you give us to do a little bit of searching. But this is an exciting space, and I'll pass it over to the CEO to give some more detail.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. And as you said, thanks, Rosemary, for giving us the pre-notice of the question, but I will read the response. So the council has received the final draft development proposal and is currently being considered. So the councillors, as you said, received a workshop on the proposal on the last Thursday, the 11th of May, and it's intended to be formally considered at the next council meeting. So full details of the development proposal will be released once the council has considered the matter.
Thank you. And just as I now have a third question that the other one can't be answered today, just with regard to the Albert Hall, and just following on from Mr. Dickinson's questions, so with regard to this current status, and obviously I've read what was in the newspaper as well, but will funding be sought from either state or federal government to maybe complete the Albert Hall development as it was originally planned? Or can you advise what is likely to be left or taken out of the development to finish it? And any idea of when it might be completed, given the problems we've had with tenders and the prices? I understand that this is just one that I've thrown in today and you probably might need to take on notice, but I think if you could give me some answers, it'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think as we were able to say, Mr. Dickinson, that this is a process that we're still working through at the moment, that those avenues are definitely continually being explored. I mean, we'd be open to any kind of assistance or professional advice on how we do continue to move forward. But at the moment, yes, this is still something that Council's working through. But I'm sure we will be open to more of those conversations and as they're being explored through the reporting.
So are you seeking federal or state funding, though, to make the original completion? I'm just wondering
Yeah, I might let the CEO speak to that.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. So we're still working through options. So you saw from the report that was presented at the last council meeting, there are a range of options that are still being considered. Funding's one of those, scope's one of those. And so it's too early to say until we have the reports back and the council have another opportunity to consider the fullness of that information. So when we do, it will obviously be transparently reported to community through the council meetings.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Matt.
Do we have some speakers from Launceston College here today? Okay.
Hello, Cooper Meikle, 1/20 Gorge Road, Trevellyn. The Examiner today reported that the lack of student parking at Launceston College is impacting attendance. Does the council think that sticking to a parking plan, as said in their response to Councillor Kai, is more important than educational outcomes for young people?
Thank you, Cooper, and I appreciate the work that you're also doing in the Youth Advisory Group. I think that this is a space where we would, as a council, love to meet and chat through the issues and concerns that the students do have, being in the city and being a public car park that is utilised by business owners, shoppers, as well as students. So in response to your question, we would be more open to, let's have a chat about it and find a time and discuss those issues.
That's good, because we sent an email 3 months ago and we have not received a reply. So I'd like to ask the council how they are surprised that young people are disengaged from politics, considering the lack of the reply we've received.
Oh, thanks, Cooper. No, any feedback that you have is warranted feedback, and we'll look through our processes and find where this perhaps has fallen short and ensure that it doesn't continue to happen.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Do we have any more speakers? I think that's all that's on the list. Yep. Whew, thanks, guys. Okay. So, after all of that excitement, we now move into the Planning Authority, part of the council here. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act in 1993, councils act as a planning authority in regards to items included in the agenda. In this one, item 9, Planning Authority. So our first Planning Authority agenda item is 9.1, and we do have some speakers to this. Thank you. This one is for 28 Maitland and 20 Church Street. So, John, didn't have to wait too long.
Thank you. John Gardner of 32 Maitland Street, which shares a 40-metre boundary for development. In summary, I've provided details to all councillors. However, there are several questions raised regarding the shortcomings in the planning report, non-compliance with the planning scheme, and subjective assessment performance criteria that leaves the development open to potential challenge. Furthermore, this development is contingent and reliant on modifications to the already approved 20 Church Street development. Therefore, the impact of these developments should be considered in combination, which is not the case at the moment. Regarding structures on the boundary, the height of buildings and structures is not accurately represented. On the southern boundary, 1 to 1.5 metres of fill has not been considered. There is non-compliance with the building envelope of up to 5 metres, which is not minor. The actual height above ground of structures on the south boundary ranges from 3 to 8 metres above natural ground, 3-storey building on the boundary. The purpose of the structure is only to provide a turning bay for the combined development and waste storage for Unit 6. The building envelope, the overall height non-compliance was not considered in the planning report. The developer's plans indicate a building height of 8.99 metres, not including roughly 1 metre of fill at the southern end of the site. So effectively 10 metres tall. The proposal exceeds the building envelope height by roughly 1.5 metres at the southeast corner and also across the entire 26 metre width of the building. The planning report makes a subjective assessment under the performance criteria and concludes that afternoon shade is a favourable outcome. Seriously, we're not in Queensland. That building that is greater than 9 metres tall and 26 metres wide is somehow compliant with the stated objective of section 8.4.2b and relies on the separation of dwellings to justify that there is not an unreasonable loss of amenity to adjoining properties. A different conclusion could easily be reached.
You just finish up your paragraph now. Yep.
There's a couple more points.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers for Maitland and Church? Right, so just looking for a mover. Someone to move the motion. Councillor Harris? A seconder? Councillor Britton? As the mover, Councillor Harris, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I do have a couple of questions that perhaps has been raised by John Gardner for you, and I'm sure you would have moved to those who might be able to answer. In regard to, first of all,
Is this, can I just clarify, is this a question or is this speaking to the point?
First.
Yeah.
Question first. I'll want to get those questions out of the way first before we talk to it, I think. The establishment of a property's building height when they're filling, I'm curious to understand the science and process that a ground level is established at. So are you able to advise us of that? Because obviously this one has some fill.
Planning Manager Richard, just around levels with fill and heights.
So the responsibility for establishing the site levels lie with the building designer. So that's the primary responsible. We don't go out and check site levels. The site levels are shown on the plans and we adopt those as being correct for the purposes of assessment.
So, yeah. How long does that site level have to be there for it to be?
No, sorry, they would establish a site level either by an AHD survey of the site, a survey, or by establishing relative levels subject to a point on the site, at which point they then mark those levels on the plan and design relative to that level.
So if a developer, prior to engaging a surveyor, were to do some filling of the land to build up the height, then that would then become the new established height?
No, the height is taken from the natural ground level, pre-development. So it's not unusual for developments to cut and fill the site, particularly on steep sloping sites. But if you cut, the natural ground level is used, the higher level is used for the purposes of establishing the height. And if you fill, the lower, the pre-existing level is used to establish the height. Does that make sense?
I think it does. I guess looking at the report that was provided by John Gardner, that he said that the ground level indicated it was 8.24 metres above ground level. His response is that it's 8.99 metres above filled ground. So he's obviously claiming 3/4 of a metre of fill has been added. Are you able to report whether that is correct or incorrect?
What we can report is that the AHD levels are marked on the plans and that we've assumed those to be correct for the purposes.
Just go a bit closer, Richard.
Yep.
There
Is that better?
we go.
So the AHD levels, which are a Australian height datum level, are marked on the plans, and we would assume that they're right for the purposes of assessment. We're not recalibrating them by employing our own surveyor. We're assuming they're right for the purposes of this.
Another question, if I may, just in regard to the building within the envelope, how is that determined, and what percentage of this building is in fact outside the envelope, particularly on the southern side?
The envelope is determined by the formula that's shown in the planning scheme standards. There are a number of diagrams and descriptions of the envelope, and we then apply those depending on what the situation is. It's very easy on flat blocks to apply the envelope. It's more difficult on sloping sites. If I can make reference to the diagrams in the report, that shows the elements that are inside and outside the envelope. The envelope is quite difficult to conceptualise on sloping sites because the taller the building, the further you need to be set back. So generally speaking, on sloping sites, it's not unusual for the setback to not be parallel to the boundary, if you understand, because the further down the slope you get, the further in you have to be. So the building envelopes tend to be kind of trapezoidal shapes and wedges and pyramids rather than the straight lines. So it is quite difficult to conceptualise on steeply sloping sites. It's not unusual for you to be in the envelope up the slope and then out of the envelope as you move down the slope, even though you are parallel with the boundary, because the height changes, and therefore as you get taller, you can be outside the envelope at the same setback and inside the envelope, if you understand what I'm saying. It is quite hard to conceptualise, but there are drawings in the report that help.
Indeed. I just, with that, if there is a slope, and let's say it's a 2 metre slope over a certain period of time, do you pick the middle 1 metre and then draw your boundary from there? Do you put it at the top and then go up and then come in? Just to help me understand where you pick that.
For example, if there is a requirement, generally speaking, on the side boundary, the building envelope is established by 3 metres on the boundary with a 45-degree.
Yep.
So that's essentially 1 metre higher than 3 for every metre that you come in from the boundary.
Yep.
So if you're 3 metres, you can, in principle, subject to some other considerations, be built on the boundary. If you are 8 metres, you have to be 5 metres in, because you get 3 metres, then 1 for 1. 1 metre higher for 1 metre in. That establishes the acceptable solution boundary.
Right, so it's really pinned at the top of the...
Sorry?
It's really pinned at the top is where you'd say to then have your building.
Yeah, on a flat block, it's the same for the length of the boundary. As blocks, it works the other way as you rise. So in this case, we're falling, but as in other scenarios where the block rises, it works differently.
Thank you for that. I might just reserve my right to speak just at the moment and allow some others some questions.
Do we have any more questions? Councillor Kai?
If we're assuming that what is correct on those drawings, and if it turns out to be not correct, that would be pretty unfair to the surrounding neighbours. So is there something that we can do in the meantime to check in a way whether what is submitted is correct or not, especially now that we have we've got 2 sets of information here and they are not agreeing, so they're conflicting, contrasting to each other. So is there any way or time that we can have to test out or check out what is correct and what is not?
I'm not sure what you believe isn't correct. What do you believe isn't correct?
We've received an email today. I think you've got that, like what Councillor Harris was saying. There is some information on there that is not agreeing. Well, they're not agreeing with what has been passed down as the planning officers recommend, the report, I should say. Yeah.
We might have the CEO respond to this one.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. So obviously on all planning matters, they are contentious. There are different views and perspectives. So what you've got here is a different view and a perspective that has been given to councillors. The officer's professional advice is as stated in the report, which we believe to be true and accurate. Obviously others disagree with that, and that's the way these processes roll out from time to time, and that's why there's appeal provisions and ability to be able to deal with those if need be. But in terms of the answer to the question that you've got today, is our advice to you is that the recommendations and the basis behind the report and the professional advice you've got is accurate, and we certainly would stand behind that for the council's consideration today.
Any more questions from the floor? Would anybody like to speak? I'd give it to Alan first. Sorry. Question, Tim? Councillor Walker?
Question, thank you, Chair. Look, and in this question, trying to summarise what's been talked about so far, I suppose, there is discrepancy in regards to where you're measuring the height of a building from, I suppose. What we have presented with us here, it does differ in interpretation, and I completely appreciate that from the perspective of someone on the other side of the fence. So can the, through you, Chair, can the officers just, definitively describe where that measurement is taken from? Is it from the point that the building touches the slope, not the projected point? Because this is a building that essentially is not being cut into the block. I think if this building was somehow cut into the block, as easy or difficult as that might be, it wouldn't present as high in that particular corner. And on top of that, can the officer comment, through you, Chair, on the fact that this also means that the building does protrude quite significantly outside the envelope, the building envelope? Thank you. I mean, I think the two are related, the height in that corner and the building envelope.
So in terms of measuring, the council officers get digital copies of the plans, and we have a digital measuring program which allows us to measure with significant accuracy on digital plans. The floor levels and the ground levels are marked on the plans, so we are very confident that we're measuring the plans correctly. The second part was, well, the diagrams in the report show the extent that the development exceeds the acceptable solution envelope. I do want to remind the councillors that there are two pathways to achieving the objective, and if it is equally valid to rely on each of those. With the performance criteria, we need to understand the circumstances and have regard to the issues in the scheme to establish whether they comply with the objective, but it is not an inferior way of achieving that objective and shouldn't be seen as non-compliance, that it doesn't meet the acceptable solution.
Question, Councillor Britton?
Yeah, only for my own clarification, but obviously on a slope, we're talking about the maximum height being 8.5 metres. Is there any consideration in the planning scheme, obviously 2 or 3 metres down that way, down the hill, that's obviously down the slope, that's now going to be over 10 metres. Is that something we consider or should consider under the scheme? And then I'll speak after that if I can. Through you, sorry.
if I'm reading you correctly,
just a little bit closer to the mic, Regent,
is that the exceeding an 8.5 is a discretion, but it is a discretion that is allowable subject to considering the factors within that performance criteria. Does that answer your question, or did you want something more specific?
No, I think that does answer my question. And look, I'm a little bit torn on this one.
So, Councillor Britton, just before you speak, is that where you're going to speak now?
Yes.
We've just got to go to the mover and the second first.
Apologies.
Oh, that's all right. No. Yes, but you're still holding your right? Yeah. That's okay.
Okay, so happy to speak now just on this. I'm sure there'll be more questions. The three standards requiring our discretion are setbacks and building envelope for all buildings, the site coverage and private open space for all buildings, and privacy for all dwellings. So I guess that is three opportunities for contention about this particular development. The development is on the rear of blocks that front at the moment onto Maitland Street. However, the access for this two-unit development will in fact be off a driveway from Church Street. It is perhaps a good use of unused land from a town planning point of view because it increases the density where it would have been difficult had the driveway at 20 Church Street not been constructed under the previously approved plans, and the land would probably have sat undeveloped. So we as a council have the opportunity to consider whether this is a suitable development for this piece of land, which will now have 6 units accessing via the one driveway. Not an extreme number, but certainly more than the single house that exists there at the moment. We will, or we do see from the plans that when you build on a sloping block that slopes down, to get a level floor, you've got to build up first with your floor to get your floor height level, and then 2 stories does make for big walls. Hence, that's why I was trying to understand when we do our building envelope that on a flat block is just straight up and then comes in at 45 degrees. When it slopes down, you do it at the top and then the slope is sliding down, which means as the walls get up, you get less and less of the building inside the building envelope, even though logically it's, if it was on a flat bit of land, it would have fitted, if you like. So that is the difficulty we have. I think with this particular development, I am still interested to hear some more. I really moved it because we cannot discuss it unless we have a mover and a seconder. It is a contentious development. I perhaps will just finish with a question while I'm on my feet, as I'll finish there. And that is about the height of the retaining wall for what will be the said driveway that will be right on the boundary of number 32 Maitland Street, where it has been built up to provide a turning bay for the previously approved unit, where we've now had to add another visitor spot because of these additional 2 units. Just the height of that, which was probably not obvious to us when we when we visited the site, to just understand, and also the distance in from the boundary that this particular retaining wall was going to be built, if you can.
Planning Manager Richard, did you catch that?
Yes, I'm just trying to identify. So is there a particular, noting that there's a wall on either boundary, is it the northern or the southern? The southern element. So that's the, so if I refer you to the plan number A18, or drawing number 34021, you can see the...
Richard, just nice and close again, sorry, mate.
Yep, sorry, you can see the wall there on in the plans, drawing number 34021. It's the south elevation. That wall doesn't have a marked dimension on the plan. I would imagine that would be in the region of between 4 and 5 meters at its highest point, and it goes down to possibly fence height at the other end, something of that nature. I don't have a digital measure with me at the moment, but it would go from approximately 1.8 to 2 meters to somewhere between 4 and 5 meters, I would imagine.
Just a subsequent question on that then, does such a wall that's running from 1.8 to 4 or 5 metres high, being built on the boundary or close to the boundary, the engineering standards that are required to build such a wall?
Well, there's one element there. The acceptable building envelope allows a wall of 3 meters on the boundary for a distance of 9 meters. So the first thing to talk about with the wall is that having a wall on the boundary of 3 meters high is not an unusual thing. It's allowable under the envelope. This is slightly less than 3 meters to slightly more than 3 meters because it's a sloping site. But the first element is that it's not unusual to have a wall on your boundary. The second element is about building, and the building issues are dealt with at the building permit stage. There would be nothing out of the ordinary about having a wall being built to your boundary. Lots of houses have walls built to their boundaries across Launceston, and it would be dealt with by just general engineering and building practices at the building approval stage.
Councillor Kai with a question.
Just a question, yes. Units 5 and 6, so on either side of those units, they don't have the minimum setback. So I was wondering whether the deck has privacy screens on them?
I just want to be clear, when you say it doesn't meet the minimum setback, do you mean outside the allowable acceptable solution envelope?
Yes.
Because that's not a minimum setback, it's an acceptable solution.
The acceptable solution of minimum
So it relies on the performance criteria. Those will need screening, and there is a condition to that effect.
Right, okay, thank you.
Question, Councillor Harris?
Just while we're on the screening and the of the thing, reminded me about the windows on both of those sides. Are you able to tell me whether they meet the conditions of height from the ground so that people can't overlook from those windows that are on that side boundary? I think the intention is to have some screening on the decking to not allow people to look to the side, but look, if you like, to the east, but not look to the south or the north, depending which unit we're on. But I'm just wondering about the windows in the north and the southern walls, whether they are in fact at the right height to stop people being able to overlook their neighbours. There's a claim in that they aren't.
Good afternoon, councillors. My name's Rachel. from the assessor on this application.
Just nice and close too, Rach.
Yeah, I can answer and say that there is a condition. It's per the acceptable solutions in the scheme that it must be a minimum of 1.7 metres high, and we have determined that there are windows that view both the open space at the rear and then the side of the properties, and the screening is generally only required on the side that is viewing another property, not into the private open space. So that's what the condition sets out. Yep. So we're only, the scheme sets out that, pardon me, that a screen is for overlooking, as you've highlighted. Yep, but it's going into a private space, so they don't need. There's not a screen required for that. It's only for that to the boundary where it doesn't meet the acceptable solution. So that's why it's resolved with the performance criteria of the screen. Yep.
Another question?
If I can, so looking at that part of the plan, it looks to be a high-level window, and it was probably in the toilet and bathroom area. Could those not be frosted so that there was no possibility?
They are, we understand, meeting the acceptable solution of the required height. So we understand that they are the required height.
Of 1.7 metres.
That's correct.
And therefore you can have clear glass.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So that meets the acceptable solution?
That's correct.
Any more questions before we go to the seconder? Might move to Alex Britton, councillor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Acting Mayor. Look, ultimately, this development is probably the natural evolution of what happens in areas like this. Personally, I think from the questions coming around the room, there is no denying that there will be a loss of amenity. I'm struggling to do that myself. If you do look at the slug, obviously 8 metres is high. It's a lot higher if you're 2 or 3 metres lower than that as well, in relation as well to not having that, and 12 months later you've been living there, and that is in your backyard. So there's no denying that they are going to lose some amenity, and for that I am a bit torn, and it's going to be hard. But look, we need more housing. We need more housing in the centre of town. It's a really hard one. I was very interested to know what anyone else was thinking. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Britton. Councillor Dawkins to
Thank you,
speak.
Acting Mayor. Not only do we need more housing, but housing is allowed for in the statewide planning scheme, for which we are here to debate today. Another difficult, contentious DA with a constrained space. It's a difficult area prior to this DA coming before us. You know, we regularly communicated with the community about the parking constraints of the area because, of course, the overflow from the hospital feeds into that area and makes it an incredibly difficult place just to do normal business and enjoy local amenity. So if we start from that perspective and start to add more houses on the hill, not in the hill, so that the architect and owner have determined that they're going to build on the hill, whereas of course there could be excavations and deepen into the hill to reduce some of that loss of amenity. But they don't have to. The planning scheme does not determine that. That is a decision that's made based on preference. Now, if we were to refuse this today, would we have a reasonable hope of supporting that refusal in the tribunal, because we understand that's, of course, where a contentious plan like this would end up, and nothing I have seen, read or listened to during our detailed visit to the site with planning officers has given me any indication of anything other than, from my perspective, a reluctant approval for this development. But again, I say I cannot see any other outcome for this particular development.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Chair. And through you, unlike the previous speaker, I will not be supporting this development application today. I do see that it is defendable under the current planning scheme, and of course that is clearly on the amenity, the exceeding of the building envelope, impinging upon the amenity of adjoining property. Now, I know that's up to different people to interpret. But in this case, it is the exceeding of the envelope which contributes to that loss of amenity, the visual loss of amenity, I suppose we'd say, under 8.4.2, which is, of course, one of the elements, that we directly look at when we talk about performance criteria. Now, that's up for every individual here today to determine, and I respect the recommendations that have been given to us by our planning team today. And of course we need more housing. I don't think that's what we're here to debate today. As much as we do need more housing, and that this is a perfect infill site. We already have a permit for 4 buildings on the upper section, which is not what we're talking about today. And it's an addition of 2 more that do impinge on the amenity of the joining neighbours. There are eminent solutions as to how that could have been solved, as the previous speaker, through you, Chair, did allude to, that it could be cut into the building, that the building could step down and therefore address the building envelope. I know that it has been said that it is difficult on a slopey site to stay within the building envelope, but of course there are many examples of buildings that step down on the slope and therefore do stay within or nearabouts to the building envelope. In this case, neither of those things have been attempted, and that's the prerogative, I agree, of the developer. It is the prerogative of this council to determine whether that fits our planning scheme, and in this case, I don't believe that it does. And of course, as I've said that recently, our very own planning minister in the state, Michael Ferguson, has made comment in regards to council decisions here, and I do question whether that is appropriate when councils are doing what they can to work with not just their community.
I'm not sure that we're here today to debate other levels of Parliament and their assessment or otherwise of our particular decisions. I think we've veered too far from the course of this discussion.
Councillor Walker, if we just stick to perhaps the facts of this DA today.
The subject at hand, and I will say that it is relevant because we have received criticism for not supporting developments that we believe have exceeded the planning scheme. I think there is no one in this table or in any Parliament in Tasmania who doesn't agree that we need more housing. It's appropriate housing that we need. And appropriate housing in this case would be housing that addresses the conditions of this site. The initial permit, which is still valid for the 4 houses on the top side of the block, did do that and was approved. These 2 additional ones are of a different nature, partly because the land itself is of a different nature. I would like to see developers do what they can to address that by being conscious of the building envelope, which is it means maybe not necessarily wholly fitting within it, but certainly not exceeding it to this point where the on-flow effect is the visual impact of the neighbours directly to the south. And I won't be supporting that today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Would anybody else like to speak to the item? Councillor Harris, would you like to close?
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and thank you for my fellow councillors' thoughts and also to our council officers for their answers to our questions. This is a difficult site. It is, in fact, quite a rocky site, which is possibly why the development is put on top of it rather than dug down into it, because of the additional cost that would entail, as well as probably difficulties then meeting the requirement to provide some parking access. You would almost end up with your garage potentially on the second floor rather than the ground floor, or sorry, the first floor rather than the ground floor, if you were in fact to dig down into the site more. So it is a contentious but nevertheless needed development of the land, because as some others have said, we do need more housing. This is a type of housing that will be attractive to certain demographics that I'm sure will enjoy their outlook over the city from this block, because it's get a good look towards the east and the rest of the city. The incursions into the building envelope are, as our officer said, somewhat unavoidable because of the slope of the ground and the fact that they haven't lowered or haven't been able to lower the building into the ground to take that away. So from that perspective, and I am happy to support the development as it is today, as presented to us, because that's the only option open to us. We can't change it. We can't make them lower it a metre. We have to decide to approve or disapprove the plans as presented to us today. And on balance, I think there is enough to say that this is a good use of the site. And although, as others have said, the residents who live at 32 Maitland Street will certainly have a different outlook in their backyard, it is something that is going to happen even if the building was lowered a metre in the ground. You would simply see a metre less of the house. So I think from that perspective, I will be supporting this and encourage you all to do the same. Thank you.
We'll put it to a vote, noting that the recommendation is to approve. So all those in favour? That is in favour, Councillor Dawkins, Pentridge, Britton, McMahon, Palmer, Dr. Raze, Harris, Garwood. Those against? Those against is Councillor Walker and Kai. The recommendation is carried. Okay, moving on to agenda item 9.2, Gledo Street. Now we do have a speaker, Michelle, and I will get you to pronounce your surname so I don't butcher it, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Michelle Swager, here as the applicant for the developer, 10 Goodman Court, Invermay. Just a few words in regard to the application. We welcome the recommendation to approve this application. We find the assessing planner's assessment of the concerns raised by the representations sent in to be sound and practical, and we agree with those responses. Between myself and the developers, we have conducted a formal study of parking in the area, as well as the availability of parking through informal observations over the course of a few months. The results have been consistent as far as we're concerned, that the area has plenty of parking options in the afternoons and evenings and over the weekend. And this is in line with the expected demand of the proposed development. And we think using the parking spaces while the demand is otherwise low is an efficient use of a public asset. In all ways, the proposed development will offset high activity times experienced by the other established businesses in the area. And we would add that the conditions included on the permit are agreeable to the developer. And I would also like to add that any neighbourly shared use of the laneway around the building can be sorted out in a neighbourly fashion, and the developer is agreeable to that also. We thank you for your time and your consideration for this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. May we have a mover? Moved by Councillor Walker. A seconder? Councillor Harris. Any questions? No? Question? Councillor Harris.
If I can, just to get if you can, I should address the question to you, Acting Mayor. Can you just tell us what the car parking changes that the Speaker mentioned that they have agreed to, what that would actually mean?
Manager of Planning, or Catherine?
There's a requested change that came from infrastructure was for 3 additional. The plans showed 6 car spaces, I think it was, in the street to be line marked, and there's a condition on the permit that 3 additional spaces be provided there.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, and there is a requirement that, at the back of it, in the laneway at the back, that the parking spaces are meant to be parallel with the building, not perpendicular, as shown on the advertised plans.
Any further questions? Councillor Walker, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will speak briefly. Obviously, the car parking, it does seem to be the contentious issue here. I mean, it is an area that is of highly mixed use. Businesses, wholesale, trade and otherwise. This is more of a retail commercial type usage, of which there has been others in the area, a gym previously, and I don't know if there's been previous complaints about parking because of that. I suppose, for any business that does rely on people parking in the area, they're going to know if parking is difficult, because it will, reflect in their trade, I suppose, as much as anything else. We certainly don't want to create a situation where parking is made extremely difficult for other people in the area, but there's such a wide variety of businesses and uses. Some people have off-street parking, some don't. I don't concur with the conclusion that that there'll be a significant issue there. And of course, it is good to see this type of use in the area, activating this area, certainly at different times of the day. And so in that case, I'm happy to move it and support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. Councillor Harris is the seconder.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, with this particular planning approval, the car parking is one of my concerns, having previously been a member of the gym that was next door to this particular place. At 5 to 6 o'clock at night, it was extremely difficult to get a park within a couple hundred metres of the gym, and I do expect that this will be the same when this first opens. However, like all things in Launceston, over time I'm sure people will settle down, get used to it, carpool, or in fact decide to park in other parking areas in the area that might belong to businesses that might be closed when they are visiting at 7 o'clock at night or otherwise. My only concern or disappointment with this particular DA is, as Councillor Walker says, this is some activation of this particular area, which is an industrial type of area, but able to have mixed use in it. It is, in fact, an ideal nighttime economy activation that, had it been on the first floor of a inner city building, would have had no such problems with parking because there would have the existing parking infrastructure. Plus, of course, it would have put more people in the centre of our city to enable all that brings with it, the activity of before and after drinks, food options, and even just having more people on the streets later at night does create a sense of safety for others who are out. And unfortunately, that won't happen when this is down in Invermay, other than for those businesses who are probably shut at later at night. So I do feel that perhaps an opportunity missed for having such a facility in the inner city, but nevertheless, we are here to either approve or disapprove it, and it's certainly, in my opinion, not enough to disapprove it, so I'll be supporting it as well.
Thanks, Councillor Harris. Any other speakers? Councillor McMahon.
I think if we look at this from a business perspective, I'm not sure it would be actually a viable business if we had it on the first floor in the city, just to accommodate those reasons given. Our city's growing, and I think we're going to be seeing more and more of these developments around our city. The developer has been very amenable to the conditions attached to the DA, and I have no issue with approving it.
Any final thoughts? We'll put it to a vote. Are you going to close? Wouldn't that speak? Okay, Tim. Thanks, Councillor Walker.
I was going to say one thing. I've lost my train of thought now because I thought I was going to miss my opportunity to just close by saying yes, and it could be, but this is it could be a type of business that someone else might think to open in the CBD, and I'm sure council would be supportive of that. But that's the great thing about business. It will find its own level in its own way, and I wish them every success. Thank you. As long as council agrees to approve.
Thank you. Now we'll put it to a vote, noting that the recommendation is to approve. That is all councillors present. Motion is carried. Right, so council no longer sits as the planning authority. Thanks, guys. Thank you, General Manager Ryan. Moving into announcements by the Mayor, 10.1, noting the events and representations that were made through May 4 to May 13. There are some amendments of these items from Monday the 15th, Tuesday the 16th and Wednesday the 17th. Do we have councillor reports? Councillor Dawkins?
Thank you. I represented the Mayor on Saturday the 13th at the ABCD learning site opening of the gardens allocated to the Fijian community. I spoke with a number of the people who were gardening and found that they were with an organisation or with a program called PALM, the Pacific Island Labour Mobility Scheme. It made me really sad. The Fijian gardeners I spoke to, they were missing home desperately. They were missing community. I took my beautiful canine with me. They were missing their dogs. They were missing everything about their homes. So to each and every one of us who's got the opportunity to reach out whenever the opportunity arises, because our demographics are shifting, we're going to be bringing more and more people in to do the work that, for whatever reason, and that's not for this debate now, is unable to be accommodated through the community. We're going to have more and more people living in kind of bubbles and to integrate into the community, which is, of course, the reason that the urban realm opened the community gardens in availability for this group, is to ensure that there's a place, a sense of community, a place that we can all meet and speak with people who haven't grown up here and welcome them into our beautiful city.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Any other community reports? Councillor Harris?
Thank you, Acting Mayor, and along with your good self and Councillor Walker, I attended the Volunteers Morning Tea on Monday out at the tram sheds, which was a opportunity to thank the many volunteer organisations we have in our city. There was probably 150 people there. They were treated to a morning tea and also a film to follow. I couldn't stay for the film, but I know it's very good to have seen it. But it does reflect on the fact that in Launceston, and in fact in Tasmania in general, the level of volunteerism is extremely high, and it was a good idea for the city to recognise those people during Volunteer Week, and I think the city should be congratulated. I think we could probably do some more and perhaps get even more groups, because I am a member of many volunteer groups, and whilst I was there as a councillor, not one of those other groups of volunteers was actually represented. So but we need to cast the net even wider, and we might need 300 or more people for morning tea. Thank you.
More councillor reports? Okay, moving forward into questions by councillors. 12.1, you will note the questions that have been addressed actually in the public questions without notice regarding Launceston College and the correspondence with Councillor Kai. So thank you for those. Do we have any councillor questions without notice? 12.2. No questions. Very kind to me. Committee reports. Moving on to agenda item number 13. Looking at the tender review, do I have someone to move? Councillor Harris. Seconder, Councillor Walker. Councillor Harris, would you like to speak to the item?
Just briefly, the Tender Review Committee met to consider a tender by Zanetto Civil for the upgrading and I think a fair bit of replacement of the Cataract Gorge Sewerage Pump Station, which is located near, off to the side of the restaurant, which has reached the end of its useful life. So we had the opportunity to discuss that, and at a cost of 665 or 663,000 exclusive of GST, some work will be undertaken which will hopefully last another 50 years on that particular sewerage pump station. We also had the opportunity to rescind a decision that was made to award a tender for the redevelopment of the playground at the Punch Bowl Reserve, which will be reconstituted, greater consultation to ensure that we have a firm idea of what we're actually going to be developing there to go back out to tender. So to me, that was some good civil governance on what we're doing, and I think it's a good thing that the council says we didn't quite get this right. It is time to make good on that, and I do thank the officers and those involved who made that decision or brought that to our attention. Thank you.
Councillor Walker is the seconder.
Thank you, Chair. It's been an issue for a number of years, the pump station at the, the Trevelyan side of the gorge. Something that you'd notice sometimes walking past just by smelling the air. So, certainly antiquated infrastructure there that will get replaced. And, it's good to note also that this has gone through when the Cataract Gorge Committee as well, indeed when Councillor Harris was still on that committee with myself, just for an understanding of how that will impact the area. And pleased to report that, every effort will be taken to minimise that impact both during and after that infrastructure is put in there. But it will guarantee that that longevity once it's done and solve some problems that have been occurring there. And likewise, Punch Bowl Reserve, a very much loved park in Launceston and deserves to have the best treatment possible in terms of new playground equipment there. And good to see the council will go back, do some more work, do some consultation, because so many people do use that park, such an important park in that part of town. And I look forward to an exciting result, really, using the natural space there, being able to create a special area there into the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Would anybody else like to speak? Councillor Harris, would you like to close? Okay, putting it to the vote, moving the report. In favour? All those present? It's carried. Okay, so now moving into item 14.1, budget amendments. So this is for the council to consider changes to the council's 22-23 statutory estimates. A decision for recommendation requires an absolute majority of council in accordance with section 82.4 of the Local Government Act 1993, and also to consider adjustments made during 1st of April to the 30th of April in 2023 by the Chief Executive Officer to the budget 22-23. Okay, so we're moving that the... Okay, Councillor Harris. Seconder, Councillor Walker. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Yes, this is something that comes regularly before us, where we have budget amendments, where our predictions have to be adjusted to match the reality. And in this case, there are some small adjustments from the, I think from the operational to the capital, and also some adjustments for the last month as well, up to the end of April. And again, that probably reflects reality about where we're at. These in a budget of $120 to $130 million are relatively minor, but because of the, I guess, the act under which we operate, it is necessary to bring it before a full council for us to consider these adjustments. They're all laid out there. I won't go through them all, but we do have coming out of one bucket into another one effectively to make it is still the same money. It's just a matter of whether it's been treated as operational or capital. So I look for the other councillors' support to approve this motion.
Councillor Walker as the seconder.
Thank you, Chair, and this is where we put our trust in our council officers who have to make these adjustments as we travel through the year. Sometimes works can't be completed when we would like to. Sometimes more money is required to complete something, or sometimes things don't have to be done that we thought were being done, or done a different way, and this reflects that. Certainly the public's welcome to have a look at all the details that are listed there, but essentially it's quite often a matter of reallocating funds as is seen appropriate by the operations as they go through their work. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the amendments? Councillor Harris to close. Okay, those in favour? That is unanimous with all councillors present. Motion's carried. Congratulations also to Nathan on his new appointment as well as the CFO. It's great to see that it was externally challenged, but locally given. Yeah, good on you. Thank you. Okay, moving into 14.2, which is City Innovation Strategy. Looking for a mover, the recommendation is that Council endorses the City Innovation Strategy ECM doc set ID 4889295. Moved by Councillor Dawkins, seconded by Councillor Harris. Councillor Dawkins, would you like to speak?
Yes. It's with pleasure that I rise to develop this, to bring this strategy to the table after many months of development from the team and consultation with the community. These are the kinds of strategies that are being delivered to councils all over the country and developed world because, of course, we're moving into a very exciting time in the digital age. It came upon us slowly, First computer that we had at school, I think 2 students were able to use it when I was in high school. I'm quite old. And it was a very protected space. It wasn't until many, many years later that having a computer at home was something that was considered to be every day. And then we move into a world where my whole life exists on this small oblong friend of mine. And we know that this is just the beginning of how our lives are going to adapt and change with the digital age. So there's great benefits to the city. We are a city of innovation, we always have been. I'm particularly interested in the sustainability element of this strategy. We need to reduce our use of resources. We need to ensure that the resources we do use, we get to use them again and again and again through the circular economy. This kind of strategy starts to develop a pathway for that to happen. Our Wi-Fi network is something that people rely on. We see people in the spaces we've developed for this very thing, plugging in their computers in the public space, using the Wi-Fi networks and getting on with their lives. So yes, as I said, it's with great pleasure we get to the next step of this strategy. I hope that we're all on board to keep moving as a community and ensuring that everybody who has any concerns about this kind of use of technology for a local government is supported through this journey.
Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Councillor Harris?
Yes, thank you. And yes, I'll also be supporting this strategy, something that came about under the 2017 Launceston City deal, where Launceston's strategic advantage of having the largest rollout of optic fibre NBN to the home in the country was to be built upon. And so this strategy is very much about what information we can provide in a timely manner to enable people to make decisions. It may well be about whether you're coming into town and you're going to go left or right to find that vacant parking spot a couple of days before Christmas when all good husbands do their Christmas shopping. That's the sort of information that we'll be able to have in our fingertips and able to be provided to our mobile phones. But along with parking and traffic congestion, I'm sure there are very many other applications. And in fact, if we were to try to imagine today what the applications would be like in just 10 years' time, if we got 2 or 3 out of 10, we would be doing very well, because there will be people using things like artificial intelligence that will take information to a whole new level in a whole space that we cannot even imagine today in our wildest science fiction degrees. So very happy that the city as a council is adopting this strategy. It is something that will help us not only maintain our place as a city of firsts, but also be a leading city council, leading city council in Australia for a whole lot of this type of innovation. Councillor Mackenzie's not here today, but he did go to a conference on this late last year, early this year, and he came back away from that conference feeling that already Launceston was leading the charge. And so this will only continue to make sure we not only lead the charge, but stay in front of the pack as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Chair. I too will be endorsing this strategy today. And of course, this technology is going to help us to make decisions where to provide extra services, where to, for example, knowing that more people are entering the gorge, for example, that's increasing, and therefore we need to provide more amenity where the traffic is going. Of course, people know that this is what these microprocessors and these sensors are able to provide us for the decision making that we do around this table. But concomitant to that has to be that we also take action where appropriate, that we learn that if it is antisocial behaviour that we're talking about, and it does and will get monitored through something like this, that we do take concomitant actions as a council to help to curb that. It's one thing to monitor it and to get an understanding of what's happening in our community, but it's another thing to take action to address that appropriately. So there's an informative aspect to it, but without us then taking the next step to protect, whether it's the environment, other people's businesses, other community members, whether it's to change traffic flow and things like that to make improvements, then really this knowledge that we're collecting is not being put to its fullest use. So that's what I would encourage out of this. Knowledge is power in that sense, but then having the understanding in how to act after that, I think, is the important step. And we need to go on that journey together. Everyone knows the rate of increase in technology is exponential at the moment. It's every day you're being informed of new applications of technology, usually based on the power of computing, and therefore, essentially linked, in this case, to microprocessors that can measure and evaluate different aspects, whether it's the weather, whether it's flood mitigation in our case. There's so many applications that will benefit all of us if we do take those actions once we understand the problems that we face. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins, would you like to close? Okay, putting that to the vote. Those in favour? Here's all councillors present. It's carried. Okay. Moving into 14.3, scholarships and bursary policy. So these have been included in the agenda. Now I will just make a note to read this part here. So the purpose of the City of Launceston Scholarships and Bursary Program is to provide financial assistance to students to enable them to undertake further education in areas which complement the vision of the City of Launceston and a talented young swimmer who competes on the national stage. The scope is the successful student or talented young swimmer will reside in the Launceston municipality and meet the selection of criteria that is outlined below. Everyone's had a chance to look at those correspondence. May I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Palmer. And a seconder, Councillor Kai? Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. It gives me great happiness to stand here and highly recommend that we move forward with these scholarships and bursaries and this policy. Recently, Councillor Kai and I had the opportunity to sit on a panel to select the recipients of these scholarships and bursaries, along with the amazing Roxanne, who led us through that process and helped us understand the whole process. So, and I also think it's important to recognise Councillor Gibson. I think actually is the reason why this Ariana Titmus scholarship is there. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I'd just like to acknowledge his work on that as well, and the entire council. But yeah, so I actually would love to see us move forward with this, and thank you very much.
Councillor Kai? Any other speakers? Councillor Palmer? Oh. No. You have to go first, Joe.
My concern is only about the University of Tasmanian bursary. Why are we excluding, why is it just state schools? Why haven't we got all schools? Does anyone have an answer?
Question?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Pentridge. This has been a long-running approach to the scholarships and bursaries policy that was endorsed by council. I can't actually remember the last time it was brought to council, but the approach has been in place for some time. When the policy was workshopped with councils most recently, I think it was Councillor Walker identified that we might consider broadening the scope of the policy. So the plan is for Roxanne and I to bring that to a workshop very soon, and that is definitely one of the matters that we could discuss.
So what you're saying is that what we're approving here today, when are we going to get the opportunity to involve private schools too, like after this event or in the next term?
I would envisage that we'll be seeking your feedback in the next, I think we'd program that to happen in the next 1 or 2 months to kick off that process. So it would probably be next year that we would bring that to council.
And so private schools miss out this year, but they will be eligible next year.
Possibly, if that's what council wishes when we undertake the review.
Well, for what it's worth, I don't approve that we discriminate against schools. You know, I think all students that belong to Launceston
Councillor
should be
Pentridge,
treated equally. Thank you.
That's noted. Yes, and that we'll speak about that through the process when we have that come to us in workshop. Yeah, great question though. Councillor Dawkins? Any other questions or any other? Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. So in the last term of council, I sat on that committee. It was actually one of the first things we did for the year because it came up early, January. And it was one of the most difficult decisions I ever had to make as a councillor, was how to determine between one incredibly successful, overachieving, high-achieving student who came from the most difficult of circumstances. So there were people from backgrounds that were not English speaking. There were many sole parents in there, people who were on disability support benefits. There were students who were working multiple jobs to support their families just to get through an average week. So whilst I understand that we need to be egalitarian and open to everybody, the way that the scholarships are generally decided, they're weighted on achievement but also on need. So I'd say, yes, there are some students in the private schools who also get scholarships to go to those schools based on the same kind of mechanisms and the same rationales, but generally we're looking through this process for students who really need our help. For many people, that $5,000 is absolutely everything to get them through a medical degree, an ambulance degree, a nursing degree, the first person in their family who'd ever been to university, let alone, been one of the highest marks in the state with our ATAR at college. So I think we are actually on the right track. I understand we should always review every policy, but I don't think in this instance that people are missing out as a result of our actions.
Councillor Dr. Raze.
Thank you. I think one of the important things about this bursary and scholarship is that the council and university show that they value and also promote education for our young people. What's find it like so shocking that we have one of the highest, one of the lowest attainments of students from year 10 to year 12. And I think by the council showing that giving this bursary and scholarship, that we are actually promoting education, we are encouraging to be educated, that they can continue to year 12. And with the university scholarship, we value as well that they can continue to study at the university as well. I think that's wide-ranging education rather than just the amount of money you give them. Thank you.
Councillor Kai, noting that you did wave off your seconder, but
Well, to ease Councillor Pentrage's concern, the University of Tasmania Scholarship and Bursary Selection Criteria, well, for that one we did in January, there was private school students there. So maybe that might help you understand. So all the students going into university, they're allowed to be from any school, private or public, yes.
okay, well, seeing as though we had already asked if there was anything further. Anything further, Councillor Palmer, to close?
No, I take on board Councillor Pentrage, his comments, and everything should always be up for review, so I'll take that on board. But I do totally agree with Councillor Dawkins. A lot of these students are from single-family homes. A lot of them are working multiple jobs to support their parents. And, yeah, I totally see what Councillor Dawkins is saying there. And it is just a wonderful initiative that we're able to do for our community. So thank you very much.
And noting that this will be coming to workshop for more conversation, and that perhaps the criteria are based in there to assist, whether it's through private schools or state schools. Those criteria will ensure that it goes to those who are in need of that as well. So putting it to the vote, those in favour? All councillors present? Carried? Continue to move on. Thanks, Liam. Okay. Community and Place Network. Welcoming to the stage General Manager Daniel Ryan. 15.1, event sponsorship signature events. This is for the year 23, 24, 25, 26. Noting that we will be up and down a little bit with those conflicts that we did express earlier. I don't believe that we have any in the signature. That's not what I got first. Oh, Councillor Dawkins, noting to leave the room. No one else has to go yet. We've got an order. RSPCA will be spoken on first because we're doing them individually. Okay, so this is based around the declarations of interest from councillors. We're going to do each motion request. So, starting off with MRC Northern Tas Incorporated for Harmony Day. The recommendation is for 5,000. Oh, sorry, my mistake. Dealing with that first, so that Councillor Dawkins can return. Okay, yeah, that's just not my first.
Just a point of order. I think Councillor Dawkins has left because 15.1 was the signature event where the organisation she's associated with applied and was unsuccessful for it, rather than the actual granting of the money, which comes, because the signature event gives you for 3 years. And that's also why I was leaving, because the Rotary Club I'm associated with applied and was unsuccessful. And so that's why we were thinking we needed to leave off 15.1.
Yes.
Because we're not now going to talk about that, but that'll be 15.2 for her smaller grant, I believe.
You might still discuss, or the table might discuss wanting to give that money or to go against the recommendations. So there still will potentially be some discussion around whether each event gets the sponsorship or not. This is the recommendation. If the council wants to go against the recommendation, then it will open for discussion.
Yeah, I'm happy to do the Million Paws Walk, but I think it's not under this one, that's all. Maybe, sure, okay.
I might get the CEO to clarify though.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. So we need to, the councillor has declared an interest in the Tasmanian Million Paws Walk.
Yep.
Irrespective of the reason why that she's declared that as a conflict. So for the sake of keeping the councillors in the room for all the decisions possible, we've chosen to do it this way, so deal with them in isolation. And obviously we're a couple of councillors down today as well. So that's the reason for doing it in this way, and it's appropriate that we do keep the councillors in the room for decisions where they haven't got a conflict.
Okay.
Shall we continue? RSPCA Tasmania, the Tasmania Million Paws Walk. The recommendation is to not be funded.
That's right. Under 15.1, that's right.
Yes?
Because
So
it's
now-
signature funding.
Yeah. So from the signature, so to clarify also I might let Councillor McMahon as the chair of that committee, what might you?
Thank you. Just so I can clarify, the signature events are the ones that are funded for 3 years running. So they only have to apply once and they get their funding for the 3 years. So just to clarify that.
And just because they might have a zero recommendation here from the committee doesn't mean that they haven't then, if fallen into the appropriate time category, get assessed in a different category, whether it's small, major. Just because they've missed out on signature doesn't mean that they're going to miss out on anything. So that's just where we are now. So that is the motion that we're doing right now. It is the Tasmanian Million Paws Walk. The recommendation is for no funding.
Under signature.
Under the signature events.
True.
So, okay, so moved by Councillor Harris, seconded by Councillor Walker. Okay, Councillor Harris.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not my mic open. My apologies. Yes, so this is line by line, I guess, where the Million Paws Walk fell under the available funding that was available for the signature small events, which, as said before, go for 3 years. And so the assessment is that the RSPCA gets $0 under this signature event.
That's correct.
So that's nothing more to say. The others were deemed to be more higher ranking by our committee. Thank you for that, our committee. Having sat on the committee previously, it is extremely difficult to separate some of these. And when you look at the scores of the others, which range between unsuccessful at 86%, meeting the criteria, and successful at 87%, you can see why it is a difficult situation. But nevertheless, this is just one. Let's move on.
Councillor Walker is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor, Acting Mayor, and I shall, keep it brief. The committee's made its determinations here, and we respect that. The RSPCA Million Paws Walk was not successful, a great as an event it is, along with a whole list of others here, and they are encouraged, indeed, to apply for small event sponsorship round 2 in later this year or in the next financial year. And some of these events will also be transferred to the smaller event sponsorship round 1 in the next financial year. So indeed, it is a competitive process. You look at the wonderful things that are going on in the community. About the only thing the council could do is look to increase the overall level that we do offer for this type of sponsorship. I'm sure that's something that we could consider, but it is a sign of how many events there are and how competitive that process is. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Harris to close, or any other speakers first? No?
Nothing further to add, Acting Mayor.
Okay, taking it to the table then. All those in favour of the recommendation? All councillors present, that one is carried. Okay, so now, noting that Councillor Dawkins has returned, and this is for smalls. I don't believe there's any more in in their small signatures. Okay, so that one's done. Okay, so now we'll go from the top, as we have no more conflicts, in small signature events. Yeah, that's what we're doing, aren't we? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. So from MRC North?
Yep, so it's everything bar the false wall.
Yes. Okay, so point 1. Launceston Community Harmony Day. The committee recommendation is the approved full amount of $5,000. Do I have a mover?
Hang on, I think we're doing them all.
Oh, we can do them all now.
Except for that one that we,
Oh, that's going to be quick, isn't it?
So it's everything in that table except for
Great.
the...
I thought we said in workshop that we were going to do line by line. Great.
No, only where there's a conflict.
Perfect. Okay, well, we're going to move that the recommendation is there in front of us from the committee, all bar the one conflict of interest. Do I have a mover that this is accepted? Councillor Walker, to accept the recommendation for all, except the one we've dealt with already. A seconder? Thank you, Councillor Britton.
Just confirming we're only dealing with table 1, not the full.
15.1? Yep.
Yes, correct, sorry.
No. It's good to check. Just blame it on the new guy. Okay, so we're dealing with the whole table. We have a mover and a seconder. Okay. Go for it. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. And we'll keep this brief. The list is there for everyone to see. I'd be more than happy to hear from anyone who is on that committee who would like to make any reflections upon the list. And I thank them for the work. And good luck to all the small signature events.
Councillor Britton. Any other speakers? Right. Okay. We are taking 15, table 1, to the vote of the recommendation. All those in favour? All councillors present? Carried. Now we move to 15.1, table 2, which is major signature event sponsorship. Now, just looking for councillor conflicts. We have Councillor Palmer and Councillor Harris. Yep, but we'll still send you out when it comes. So we're going to do dance sport first. Great. Okay. So, noting the conflict of interest, we're going to deal with Tasmanian Dance Sport Championships, where the recommendation has hit 81%, which is 100% of the application, $18,200. Do I have a mover? Councillor Walker. A seconder? Councillor McMahon. Councillor Walker.
Not being a dance sport champion myself, I certainly have no vested interest in this particular item. I congratulate the Tasmanian Open Dance Sport Championship on their successful funding.
Councillor McMahon?
I think one of the reasons why they did rate so highly is it is quite a unique event for us here in Launceston, and certainly brings in quite a few people from interstate as well and internationally.
Any other speakers? Councillor Walker, would you like... Councillor Harris?
Yes, I think we should give some consideration to the comments that were made earlier about the Launceston Cup Carnival, which has previously been a signature event and has missed out.
Are we...
Oh, no, we're not doing that one, are we? Sorry, yeah, I will sit on that one.
No, we might... we'll have Councillor Palmer back when we discuss. Okay, so we're just doing the Tasmanian Open Dance Sport Championships for this particular moment. So anything further as the mover to close? Councillor Walker? Right, putting it to the vote. Recommendation for 100% funding for Tasmanian Open Dance Sport Championship, which is all those councillors present. It's carried. Now we welcome back Councillor Palmer. Okay, and so we're going to move to our next declared interest, which is the Launceston City Cycling Club. Sorry. The one above it, sorry. We're looking at the Cycle Challenge. That's right. Which is the one above it, in the brackets. Okay, in which we note Councillor Harris is leaving the room. Okay. So the Rotary Club of Central Launceston, Tamar Valley Cycling Challenge, featuring Sally's Ride. Noting that the funding was put forward for $12,500, 63% of the criteria was the score, and the recommendation is at not funded. Do we have a mover? Councillor Walker. Seconder? Councillor Kai. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Not much to say here. Look, let's just move through
Sorry.
Obviously, time's up, but yeah, unfortunately, Sally's Ride, which has run for many years, not successful in this round, of course, encourage them to apply to future rounds. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Kai, anything further? Any other comments? Councillor McMahon.
If I could just bring to everyone's attention that they will move across to the major event sponsorship round.
Fantastic, thank you. Nothing to close? Okay, taking that one to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation? That is all councillors present. Motion's carried. And we welcome back Councillor Harris. And now we deal with no more conflicts of interest, and we deal with the whole table. So, as stated in front of you, if you have it, you can see the recommendation. Do we have a mover that the rest of the table is supported by the recommendation? A mover. Councillor McMahon? A seconder? Walker? Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. I think I probably would like to speak on the process that things go through, because we've obviously had a few people disappointed not getting funding. The grants and sponsorship funding requests were of an extremely high standard, and while as council it would be wonderful if we could give everybody funding, but unfortunately we're not able to do that. The applicant's submissions are put through a rigorous assessment process, which took the panel over 7 hours to complete this time around, which is a reflection of the quality and quantity of the applicants. And due to the number of quality of the applications, obviously some people have missed out being signature events that have previously been in this space. But in saying that, there is opportunity for them to reapply for the funding each year rather than being secured the funding for 3 years.
Thank you. A question, Councillor Harris.
Yes, if I can, through you, Mayor, Acting Mayor, what is the budget that we have for this year, and how does it A, compare to the previous year? Is it more or less? Has CPI been included? And the second question is, what split up of the sponsorship budget does signature events get compared to the whole of large events, and also the same for small events? Is it 60-40, whatever? So if those questions might be answered.
Great. Yes, I might hand those ones to General Manager Ryan.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Harris. So the total funding pool for events throughout the year is just over $1 million. That's through all the various categories. If we were specific around the signature events which you've referenced, there's $200,000 for this year's signature event program, and for large signature event program, and $20,000 for the small signature event program. In terms of variance versus last year, there has been a $25,000 decrease on the large signature event sponsorship, so from $225 to $200. Which equates to just under 12% discount. The change in that category and a few others within the broader events program is primarily due to a couple of long multi-year arrangements, partnership arrangements we have in place with 10 Days on the Island and Mona Foma, which takes away a chunk of revenue from the entire, a chunk of budget away from the prior event sponsorship pool to support those activities over a period of multi-years. So, yeah, the signature event program, the major signature event program, is one of those categories that is compromised, in this case by minus $25,000, due to that support of those other two partnerships. And no CPI from previous years. Sorry.
Any further questions? Speakers? Okay, yep, as the seconder.
Thank you. Just briefly, let's just have a look at this wonderful list of events that we'll be enjoying in the north of Tasmania over the next 12 months. Spectacular is all you can say. And, you know, interesting, fun, unique. Launceston Ukulele Jamboree, for example, something new that's sort of making its presence known in Launceston. This, you know, taps into, you know, a popular pastime that you just wouldn't expect as a festival, as a major event. Fantastic. You know, everything here from motorsport to festivals and cycling that's been applied for, not always successful. It just shows you how much activity is happening in the north of the state, the sort of adventure capital of the state, basically. And I think the work that the committee does, the difficult work that you'd have to do to weed through all these different applications, and especially the amount of effort that people put in to applying for these grants, including the Turf Club, which has been a mainstay of Launceston calendar for many, many years. And I do note that there's been a reduction in the amount. I suppose that's to do with the competitive nature of what we're seeing here. It is a significant event in Launceston every year, but this is just indicative of the change in our society, that there are other events that are becoming just as significant. Thank you, Chair.
Another question, Councillor Harris?
Yes, I just digested what Officer Ryan said about the $1 million budget. Was that $1 million per year that we have for sponsorship? Thank you for a nod. And of which 200,000 goes into the large event sponsorship bucket, which means we know that's 200 grand for the next 3 years, which is fine. What's left for the large events for round 1 and 2 out of that $1 million? Do you have that figure at all?
For the non-signature events?
Yes, that's correct, non-signature.
So major event sponsorship pool for the year is $185,000.
So 185 for rounds 1 and 2?
Correct.
And how does that compare to previous years? Is that also reduced by 12%? Or
That's down, yes, just under 12%, down to $185,000 per annum.
Righto. And do you have the same figures for the small events? While I'm on my feet, I might as well get them.
Absolutely. So small events, bear with me for one moment. Small event sponsorship for the year is $100,000, down from $109,000 last year.
And again, the split between signature and non-signature?
Our small signature event budget was $20,000,
yep.
Correct.
Leaving $80,000 we split over 2 rounds for the small non-signature.
No, that's a separate pool. So there's $20,000 for small signature events and $100,000
for rounds 1 and 2.
Round 1 and 2.
Non-signature. Thank you. That's very good, because I guess from some of these events, from small things, big things grow, and it is always important that we do that. And like Councillor Walker, I also was, I couldn't figure out what happened to the Turf Club, but that really is, their event falls, of course, in February, which is round 2. So that's why it's not on our round 1 events. So it's not that they've missed out, it just means they're not a signature event anymore, and they have the opportunity to gain access to this 185k pool of other funding for the large events. So that's perhaps answers their question of where that has gone as well. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McMahon to close. Okay, noting the conversation and the recommendations, taking that to a vote. Those in favour to go with the recommendations of the committee? All councillors present, the motion is carried. So now we move into small event sponsorship, round 1. Okay, I believe there's no conflicts here. Right, so 15.2, table 1 we're looking at now. All right, looking for a mover to the recommendation. All right. Oh, we can vote for everything now? Okay, because there's no conflicts, we'll do point 1, 2, and 3. Do we go further into major? We want to do those? Yes, yep. We'll just do it bit by bit. So table 1, 2, and 3, you can see the recommendations there from the committee. I'll give everyone a moment just to catch that up as I've fluffed it around a little bit. It'll save a bit of time. So we're doing all of the tables now for the small events. Yeah. So small event sponsorship round 1, table 1, 2, and 3. And the recommendations are there. I'll look for a mover. Thank you, Councillor McMahon. A second, Councillor Harris. Okay, Councillor McMahon, anything further to add? Great.
Yes, as you can see, we've got some amazing small events happening around our city, and we did actually find it really difficult to get through all of these and try and find a fair and equitable way to encourage people to start new small events, like we have got some new ones on there. So it was decided in this section, we got to a certain point that to be fair and equitable where possible, some of the available funding was spread across a greater number of events rather than excluding events from receiving funding altogether. So I think we're now getting the opportunity for quite a few great events to be happening across our city.
As the seconder, Alan? Councillor Harris?
Yes, happy to support the idea of spreading the love, if you like, because I think that's very important. It is always difficult when an organisation has put their funding in and they rate 49% and not 51%. You know, the difference is they get funded or they don't. And it is a difficult thing, and I'm sure the committee, that they did spend the 7 hours doing it, because I've spent that sort of time as well in the past. And I know it is particularly difficult, but as I said, I like to see the fact that there is such a wide range of events and that each of those events add to our vibrancy of the city, and I think it's one of our better programs, and that's why I really just wanted to get to understand how much of our budget, and thank you for those figures earlier, because this is really the heart and soul and what makes Launceston. So, yeah, happy to very much support it.
Anything to close, Councillor McMahon? Okay, we'll put it to the vote. The vote is to take on the recommendation from the committee. All those in favour, and it is all those councillors present noticing that Councillor Kai has popped out. Carried. Okay, so moving forward now, 15.3, major event sponsorship round 1. We have no declared interest, so we'll do table 1.
There is an interest in this, isn't there?
I don't have it written down.
Yeah, in table 2 he has Rotary Club. It's where they're actually getting funding recommended for Sally's Ride. You could deal with that,
and then we'll
one,
do all
and
of
then
them.
deal everything again.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Noting Councillor Kai returning, 313. So we are going to go to table 2. So 15.3, table 2, and deal with Tamar Valley Cycling Challenge featuring Sally's Ride, as it does have a declared interest. You will see that the request is $12,500, and the recommended has come in there as stated. Can I get a mover? Okay. Councillor McMahon, seconder. Councillor Kai. Councillor McMahon, anything further to add? Yeah. Councillor Kai? Anybody else to close? Councillor McMahon? No? Okay. Putting this one to the vote. Voting that the recommendation is to do the 5753 carried. All councillors present. Thank you. Okay, welcoming Councillor Harris back. Here he is. Okay, so now we can move forward with the remaining items in table 1, 2, and that continues, and 3. Okay. Okay, noting again that you'll see the table in front of you going with the recommendation from the committee. Do I have a mover? That we're moving everything that wasn't just discussed then, which was Sally's Ride? A mover on the recommendation. Councillor McMahon, second to Councillor Britton. Councillor McMahon.
I think all I can say throughout this whole process...
I'm going to keep asking you, sorry.
We should actually be really proud of a council that, and I actually, correct me if I'm wrong, are we one of the only councils that actually has this kind of funding for events?
A question?
Anyway.
A question? We'll take that on notice and we'll find out.
Yeah. I think we should be really proud of a council that we're supporting so many events within our city. And there are a lot, and we should be also very thankful for the people who put their time and effort into giving us these events and providing these things for our community to enjoy. So, yeah, I think we should be proud on both sides of the coin.
Councillor Britton? Any other speakers? Councillor Walker?
And so what we have here is some who have applied for signature funding who weren't successful. Sorry, apologies for bumping the mic there. Who are successful here for the major sponsorship. So that is good to see, and just good to see that healthy competition. And again, as Councillor McMahon says, the effort that people put in, not just making the application, but the event itself and volunteers, all that type of thing. Thank you, Chair.
Anything further, Councillor McMahon? Taking it to a vote, voting on the recommendation from the committee. All those in favour? All councillors present? It is carried. So we just did table 2 and 3. Are we moving on to... Did we include...
Yeah, they included that.
Yep, we included also special events. Okay. We're up to 16?
No, 15.4.
Which one's that?
The call.
Oh, sorry, I did ask if we'd done that one. No, okay, so special events budget. This is a specific budget for special events. You can see the recommendation here. And should it be recommended, $50,000 is going to the Cause Down Under Launceston event. The remaining balance will be at $20,000. Do I have a mover? Moved by Councillor McMahon, seconded by Councillor Kai. Councillor McMahon?
So I guess we don't often get big events like this here in Launceston. I don't know about all of you, but I've already got my tickets. I'll definitely be there, and I think it will definitely generate a lot of income for our city. And yeah, happy that we could help.
A question, Councillor Harris?
Yes, just in regard to the cause and the use of UTAS Stadium for this event. The $50,000 that we're giving them, I take it, is cash, but are they also paying for the hire of the stadium? And are we able to understand what that hire fee might be? Or is that commercial in confidence?
I can recommend that question to General Manager Ryan.
So I can confirm, Councillor Harris, that the fee associated with the hiring of UTAS Stadium is completely separate from the grant funding, so they would still need to pay for that. I don't have the exact figure on the cost, but I can certainly get that for you, but I think it's around the vicinity of around $20,000 thereabouts.
Cool. Any further comments? Questions? Councillor McMahon, anything to close? Okay, taking it to the vote. The recommendation is that $50,000 out of the $70,000 budget goes to the special event, the Cause Down Under Launceston event, remaining balance of $20,000. All those in favour? That is all councillors present. The motion is carried. Agenda 16. Okay, moving into agenda item 16, Infrastructure and Asset Network. 16.1, Launceston Flood Authority Report. I have a mover, Councillor Walker, seconder, Councillor Harris. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, and this is a regular report that the council receives. I have noted previously that I would like to see the Flood Authority acknowledge, it's not directly their responsibility, I suppose, but that their mitigation efforts also include any response to climate change and sea level changes. But nonetheless, this is the nuts and bolts of what happens in those flood levy protected areas, and we can see the key priorities for the coming quarter there for the Launceston Flood Authority. This is the authority that protects vast areas of Launceston land that has residential properties on it, as well as, of course, businesses. And those people can be rest assured that that live in that area, that this is being constantly addressed, that there's constantly, even though there's a favourable variance here in terms of their budget, I'm sure that doesn't mean they're not busy. It just means that they've had some good fortune in terms of not having to spend, I think they say, favourable variance in contractor costs, which is probably welcome news in this current climate of inflation, labour costs and so forth. And obviously things that you can see, replaced pipes and things like that, that's just constantly going on. I suppose for anyone who lives in those areas, they would see this work being carried out on a well, if not a daily basis, quite regularly. So yeah, thanks for keeping us updated. That's their role, and keeping Launceston safe.
Councillor Harris is the seconder. Any other speakers? Councillor Walker to close. Okay. Put it to the vote then. All those in favour? All councillors present? Motion is carried. Yeah. Okay, so just taking a moment to get myself organised. As we move into closed council. Right. Okay, Councillor Harris moving the motion to move into closed council. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Dawkins. Would you like to speak to it? No, we don't normally. Put it to a vote. Yeah, we're in. Doors closed. accept that we did what we did without saying anything. Okay, council now moves back into open session. And can I have a motion that we accept the agenda and correspondence of closed council? Where's that yet? Okay, so the recommendation that you're going to be moving and motioning is that council, pursuant of regulation 34(1)(b) of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, resolves the report in open session that it has considered the following matters in closed session: closed council minutes and councillors' absence of leave. Do I have a mover? So Harris, a seconder. Councillor Brixton, all those in favour? All councillors present. Motion is moved, carried, and we are finished. Meeting closed at 3:26. Thank you all for your patience.